Hi, I'm Deborah McAllister, and this is my story. In 2009, I met and later married the love of my life, my soulmate, Billy McAllister. Man, after we got married, it was a marriage like no other. Really, I don't even think that we could have loved each other any harder than what we did. I often hear people use the phrase, if walls could talk. If our walls could talk, they would tell you a love story. In August of 2017, after what we thought was a routine visit to the doctor's office, he was diagnosed with colon cancer. After the diagnosis, things just really changed. Our world just changed. It just flipped upside down because we went from being at the highest high to the lowest low. His faith never wavered. I mean, you would go to him to encourage him, and he would sit there encouraging you. You know, despite what the doctors have told him, he was still just believing that God was going to heal him, and which God did. He just healed him on the other side. On the early morning of October the 19th, 2018, the love of my life transitioned in my arms in our bedroom. I often think about the scripture, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. And I was like, God, here was a laborer. I just didn't understand it. I've always found that God's presence and his peace was there. I still have what I would call my hills and valley moments. But again, I promise you, God is there even in those moments. He has always shown himself true and faithful. I am so very grateful to have known and to have a relationship with the Lord before this happened, because this season really tested my faith. And do hear me, season. Ecclesiastes talks about times and seasons, and we're all going to have a season of grief in our life. The Cornerstone Church of the Calhoun County We Group helped tremendously. They were actually my eyes, my hands, and my feet, because I don't want to use the word shocked, but I was just numb. So I needed someone to think for me. I needed someone to help carry me through those times, through those transitions. There were times that I couldn't pray. I had people praying and interceding on my behalf because I could feel the presence of God. I can feel that peace, even in the midst of being so broken and maybe having one of my valley moments. On top of all of this, within the last 2 months, I had my own personal health scare. And it made me prioritize things and think things through differently. I would always tell God after my husband transitioned, Lord, I want to smile again. But after that particular scare, he reminded me why we should smile daily and not take life for granted. Because one call or one visit to the doctor's office can change your life completely. He had also shown me that, and it's not taking away anything from my love, but he had also shown to me while in the midst of struggling and having this health scare, I had a conviction where I was talking about my love more so than him. And he reminded me that yes, your husband loved you, but I not only loved you, I died for you. God is real. And he's shown himself strong and mighty in such a time as this. Again, God is real. And in times like this, you can choose to fold or you can choose to trust him. I choose to trust him. I have a peace. Yes, you're looking at someone who's broken, very broken, but yet I'm a believer.
Amen. What a powerful, powerful testimony. Thank you, Deborah, for doing that. How many of you have gone online, gone to a store, and you see a piece of furniture that you really like, so you buy it or you order it, and someone brings it out of the back or you receive it, and what you saw was a nice big bookcase that you were ordering, but then you got a little box about that flat. You ever done that? And you're like, they must sent me the wrong thing. There's no way my big bookcase is in this little flat box. And then you open up the box and the instructions right on top, take everything and lay it out so you can see everything. So you take every little piece, you got styrofoam everywhere, you got all these little pieces and this crazy looking bag of parts of nuts and bolts and cams and shafts and pegs. Sitting in the midst of all those pieces, you can begin to scratch your head. How can I possibly keep all of this or put it all together? Scratch my head. What does it look like? Ha! Scratch my head. You ever sat whenever you're trying to put something together and you're like, I don't know what to do? You ever felt like that? Have you seen anybody who sat down in the midst of that and actually smiled? Like this couple? No. I think that was a promotional thing. No, nobody smiles when they open those boxes and they see all those pieces. That's a joke. The idea is just to kind of get through, right? And don't ever try to put anything like that together with your spouse. I mean, I'll be divorced if Georgie tried to help me with that kind of thing. It would not be good. We wouldn't be together long. Whenever you have this new box, this new thing that you've just gotten, and you have all the pieces all around, and it looks like chaos, what do you really need in order to get through with your sanity and with a level of peace? You need three things. Number one, you need everything that's in that box. You don't need anything to be missing or broken. Matter of fact, that's part of the instructions, right? Lay everything out, make sure there's nothing missing, nothing broken. Number two, you need good instructions. How many of you have gotten instructions and they're not clear? Or it's in another language? Or the instructions are in like 5 different languages and you have to find English in there somewhere. And even if you have instructions that are pretty clear, they aren't clear to me unless I have a picture. And I don't like the pictures when they just kind of draw it. You ever seen those? Like they're trying to show part A goes into part B, like this person couldn't even draw. This doesn't make any sense. I like real pictures. Show me the hand, show me this thing's got to go around in this circle. I need clear instructions. And so if you open up this box and you get everything set out and there's nothing missing, nothing broken, you've got real good instructions, I still need one thing. I like to have a hotline. At the end of the instructions, we've made this thing. There's nothing missing here. There's nothing broken. Instructions are implicitly simple, easily illustrated. However, if you still have a question, we have a problem, call our 1-800 number, or we'll chat with you online. You say, that kind of brings it down a little bit, I've got everything I need. I got some clear instructions, and if I still can't figure it out, I got somebody I can call. In life, we open up a lot of boxes for a lot of different seasons in our life. We can open up a new box of a new relationship. You establish a relationship, and then you open it, and then hear all these pieces out, and you think to yourself, wow, there's a whole lot of pieces to this relationship I didn't know was there. There are a whole lot of pieces I don't know where to go. I don't know if I can hold all this together. You can open the box of a new career. You don't know the politics of the place that you're working. You're afraid you aren't qualified enough. You have all these different relationships and things that are going on. You don't know if you really like it or not. The work may be too hard or too easy. And all these people you have to work with, you don't really like a lot of them. Here's all these pieces. And then you get married. And then that's a big old box you have to open, right? A whole lot of pieces. Their family, my family. If it's a blended family, their kids, my kids, our kids. Wow, So many pieces. Or you can be like Deborah and you open up a box of the loss of a loved one. Here are all these pieces everywhere. How can I hold all this together? How can this make sense to me? In the midst of all that, any box of struggle, any box of chaos, and we all open a lot through our life, any type of box of struggle or chaos you open, as a believer, as a Christian, you have the ability to open that box and walk through it with peace. You know, that is the biblical definition of peace means that there's nothing broken, there's nothing missing. There's in the midst of that box, in the midst of that struggle, in the midst of that chaos, God is there with you in it. And through the Holy Spirit of God living in you, you can have peace even in the midst of that. Things don't have to be peaceful to have peace. That's what we seek. What we want is our box and everything to be already pre-assembled. We want to know what it looks like, and we want it to look like just like we wanted it to look like, right? We want it to be peaceful. How many of you like peace? I was reading a survey recently that is one of the major needs of a man. A man likes peace. We're very anti-drama. We don't like that. But men and women both, we want just to be able to take a deep, we want to go, we want to feel that peace. But most of us, most of the time, we tie that feeling of peace to peacefulness. We think everything is going to need to be okay. And we're constantly looking for the outcome, the change. We want everything in life to become peaceful. It just doesn't happen that way. And as believers, we need to come to the realization that we have a power within us that allows us to have a peace in the midst of the struggle. Having peace doesn't mean the absence of chaos. It doesn't mean the absence of struggle. It doesn't mean the absence of heartache or brokenness. Peace is something that the believer has because the Spirit of God lives within them. Things don't have to be peaceful to have peace. And I'll tell you why. And this is the main point I want you to get this morning from the message, and it's this. Peace happens in you, not to you. Peace happens in you, not to you. Someone who does not have an intimate relationship with God is constantly fighting and struggling to try their very best to make things around them be peaceful. That's where addiction comes from many times. Someone is looking for something to kill the pain because they can't find the peace. That's where people make bad decisions and bad choices because they're desperately trying to kill the hurt and the stress and the brokenness. Now today we're continuing in our series called The Struggle Forward, and this is a very practical spiritual warfare series where we're giving real practical handles on how to wage a successful, a victorious spiritual battle. And we're looking at Ephesians chapter 6, and it says to stand firm with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from peace. You know, when I studied martial arts, all of my instructors would always emphasize and overemphasize your stance. Put your feet shoulder width apart. Bend your knees. Get down a little low. Make sure you don't have any weight that's just on your toes or your heels, but you need to be solidly planted. That is the best, the most effective way to initiate and take on a battle or initiate a battle. That's why whenever you see professional football players, they get down in the three-point stance. They put it solid on the ground. That's why our foundation is peace. We have to be solidly placed in peace because the enemy will come against us and hit us, and we have to be placed. We have to be ready for what the enemy would send toward us. Unlike the ballerina. Allison, not bashing ballerinas, but you know, if you're all up in there on your toes, which I'm not a ballerina, I can't get on my toes, thank you. But this is a very vulnerable position. You can be knocked over very easily like this, can't you? Especially if you do the 1 foot thing, which I refuse to do. It's about having a strong foundation, that you're standing on something that will cause you to be strong. Peace allows you to be strong. It allows you to engage the enemy face to face and defeat him. But if you don't have a strong stance of peace, you won't see victory. Peace is essential to having victory over the enemy. I want us to look at an Old Testament story I think illustrates that real well, some things that we can pull from that. And it's from the Old Testament book of Daniel. Many of you are familiar with this story. It was a time when Israelites were being disobedient to God, so God's judgment fell upon them, and his judgment came in the form of the Babylonians, a very strong, powerful neighbor. The Babylonians, they came in, and they conquered the Israelites, and they took all the young women, all the young men as slaves back to Babylon. Now, one particular young man in that movement, his name was Daniel. Now, God loved Daniel. God blessed Daniel. Daniel was favored by God. And because of that, he grew in prominence and influence, and he got the attention of the king. The king said, here's a guy that's really so talented. He's got it all together. He's really gifted. I need to make him a part of my court. And so he becomes an essential part of the king's court. And not long after that, Daniel used his place of prominence and influence to also promote 3 of his friends that came with him. He placed these 3 friends in a prominent government position. So they began to have influence. They began to gain notoriety. Well, while all this was happening, the king of Babylon, his name was Nebuchadnezzar, he came to the realization that he was actually a god. Wow. You wake up one morning, you look in the mirror, I am a god. So he says, I am a God. I am a living God in flesh. I am a deity, and all deities, all gods need to be worshiped. And so he fashioned a large golden statue in his image, placed it in a prominent place in the capital city, and says, now, this is what we're going to do. He issues a decree, puts forth a law. I'm coming up with a special sound from trumpets and instruments, and it has a distinct sound. So whenever you hear this trumpet sound, it doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing, who you're with, or what time it is. You're to fall on your face to this idol, to my image, and worship it. As you can imagine, that became a problem for Daniel's 3 friends because they were God-fearing men. They trusted God. And they understood the law. You don't bow down to idols. You don't pay homage to any graven image. And so whenever the trumpet would blow, and they were required to fall down and worship, Daniel's 3 friends did not. It didn't take long for their defiance to be noticed, particularly by a couple guys who were jealous that these 2 guys were promoted ahead of them, and they weren't even from their country, you know. There are foreigners among them. So they go and they tell the king, Daniel chapter 3, verse 12, there are certain Jews, namely Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men do not worship the gold image which you have set up. They're disobeying your creed. So the king calls them in. He said, I need to make sure, because these guys are friends of Daniel's, I need to make sure that everything's good. I really like to give these guys a second chance. So he calls them in, says, you guys don't understand. This is the deal. Verse 15, if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? This wasn't an idle threat. I'm sure they had seen other people who have defied the king, maybe thrown into the fiery furnace, maybe gone through other types of torture, execution. And so this was real. This was not a veiled threat. This was the real deal. However, verse 16, so the three respond. We have no need to answer you in this matter. Our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us. We're not going to worship you. We're not going to worship your image because we worship the one and the true God, and we're not going to defy him. Our God can rescue us. Our God can deliver us. Verse 18, but even if he does not, say even if. Even if he does not. Even if. You see, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they had even if peace. Even if peace. They had the understanding that this is not my hope, my peace, my faith is not tied to a desired outcome. If the outcome doesn't come the way I want it, I'm going to lose faith, I'm going to lose peace, I'm going to lose all my joy. No, that's not it. They had even if peace. See, Deborah has even if peace. In her testimony, I'm so glad that I have peace. Does that mean, did that lessen Deborah's hurt? Did that diminish her brokenness? No. But in the midst, when you open up that box of brokenness and loss, in the midst of that, knowing that God is with us, and regardless of the outcome, he will continue to be with us. That gives us that even if peace. Even if. My faith in God does not depend on my desired outcome. It's not going to shake our resolve to serve our God. So they go on to say, the last part of verse 18, they said, let it be known to you, we will not worship the gold image which you have set up. Even if God doesn't save us. I'm telling you, God is able to do that. We know, but even if. So the king threw him in the fire. Maybe in their minds, they were thinking, yeah, God can save us. Maybe right before they throw us in, the king's going to change his mind. God could certainly have done that. But they angered the king so much. Not only were they defiant and not obeying him, they did it with a smile. They just laid their even if peace out there. Even if, baby. Even if. And he got mad. Well, he told everybody, crank that furnace up the hottest it's ever been. I want this thing to melt the whole earth. Crank the furnace up the hottest it's ever been. And the guys who were going to throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fire, they got burned up, trying to get him into the fire. And finally got him into the fire and thrown him in. The top of the furnace was open. You could look down in there. Nebuchadnezzar was looking down there. And he sees Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego just walking around. What kind of voodoo is this? And not only does he see them, the three of them walking around, he sees a fourth person with them. He said, they got to melt any minute. They can't be that fireproof, that's hot. Then eventually he realized this isn't doing a thing. So he hollers out, hey, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, you all right? Yeah, king, we good. What in the world? This thing must not be working. How can this furnace not burn these guys? But listen, y'all come on back out because this isn't working. So they came back out, but only 3 of them came out. Not a hair on their head was singed, and they didn't even smell like smoke. Didn't even smell like smoke. And when the king saw that, he said, you know what? I have come to the realization I am not a God. The God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, now that's the God. That is the true God. And so they have this little revival meeting. Now the king changes his decree. No, y'all don't worship me anymore. Y'all worship the one true God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now that part is a great story, and we could run with that, but that's not what I want us to remember out of the story. What I want us to remember and focus on is what happened before they got into the fire. What allowed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to have even if peace? Now let's just be honest with each other. These guys have seen the king execute others. They felt the flame. How many of us wouldn't say, if we're in the same place, say, you know what, I'm just going to pray about this real quick. God, I'm going to bow down, but now I'm going to confess real fast. Most of us would consider that thought, including me. That's a lot of even if faith. When you see that big furnace stoking up, and you've smelt before the smell of burning human flesh. And they've burnt their fingers and their hands on fire before. They know the pain associated with that. They're going to burn you to death. How many of us could have even if peace in that scenario? What allowed them to be able to do that? You see, they had peace before they ever faced that fire. You have to have that before you face such a thing as that. You got to have peace. In the midst of an incredible life-threatening circumstance. Do you remember the story whenever the Israelites, they got released from Egypt and they weren't far out and Pharaoh changed his mind and he sent his entire army after them? He was going to retake some of them, kill some of them, and they found themselves with their back against the sea. And here is the world's most powerful army barreling down on them. Needless to say, they were extremely afraid. They were worried. They were fearful. And in that moment, through the Spirit of God, Moses gives them a word, and this is it, Exodus 14. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall what? You shall what? Hold your peace. Here's death and slavery coming down upon you. No, you hold your peace. The Bushmen in Africa discovered hundreds of years ago one of the best ways to catch a monkey. You take a hollowed out tree, cut a hole in it, so that the monkey can barely get his hand through it. But then you put his favorite treat on the other side. So when he reaches in, he grabs his treat. When he makes a fist, and his hand becomes too big to get it back out of the hole. So then you can just leisurely walk out of the bush and say, got you, man. You can capture the monkey. The monkey, even though certain death is coming, what he had was so valuable to him, he would hold it. That's what peace is. You hold on to peace. It doesn't matter what's coming on you. I am a child of God. This is happening in me, not to me. Everything around me doesn't have to be peaceful for me to have peace. We have to be a people that learn to hold on to our peace. We look back at Daniel's friends. You know what they learned to do? They learned to face the flame before the fire. Even before they were faced with certain death, they exercised, they put themselves in that place. They were prepared for that place. They had this intimate relationship with God. You can't go into life unprepared. There's not a person in here that through your life, you're not going to open up a lot of boxes of hurt, a lot of boxes of disappointment and brokenness, a lot of boxes of this. It's just that's just life. You have to be prepared for that. You know, if you have a pan in the oven, in a 400-degree oven, do you just walk over, open the door, and grab it? Do you do that? If you did, you don't do it once. No, before you get into that situation, you prepare yourself. You get a hot mitten, right? Hey, this thing is really hurt. This is dangerous. But even though it's still hot, I can control it because I've prepared and I have something to protect me from the heat. That's what peace does. Peace protects you from the fear of the heat. Real peace comes when we're convinced of two things. Two things. Number one, we have to be convinced that nothing is too difficult for God. And number two, God is for me. Nothing is too difficult for God. See, that's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, you know. Our God is able to deliver us. There's nothing too difficult for God. And most of us would agree with that. How many of you, when I was a kid, when I was a little kid, we played God Is So Strong? Did you ever play that? I'm the only real, I think it was a game that I made up. But anyway, you know, with my cousins, we'd sometimes get around and we say, you know, God is so strong, he can lift that car. No, God is so strong, he can lift that car with one finger. No, God is so strong, he can lift that car and just throw it up and down. He can lift 10 cars. God is so strong, he can even lift that house. Then the next cousin, oh no, God is so strong, he can lift this whole city. God, he can lift the earth, though he can lift the whole universe. It's like, you know, God is so strong. Most of us would say that we really do believe that God is strong and God is powerful. We can grasp and believe, but you know, there's nothing too difficult for God. But then the second part is the even if peace. That God is for me. Regardless of what it looks like. You see, this big idea that nothing's too difficult for God, that's still an idea that puts God a little bit out away from us, but for us to believe that God is for me, that takes that personal inside conviction and understanding and being convinced of that. That takes more. But we have to have both of those to develop that even if peace. Nothing is too difficult for God. And God is for me. If I have those things, then I also become convinced that peace happens in me and not to me. I take a strong stance. You see, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they didn't focus on the fire. If all they did was run over in their minds how hot the fire was, play it out in their minds, how bad it was going to hurt, what was it going to feel like to be burned to death, that's some pretty heavy-duty stuff. Most of us would begin that process. But if you focus on the fire, you'll lose the fight every time. What we should do, we need to focus on the Father, not the fire. You can't focus on the chaos. You can't focus on all the parts that are all around you that you just don't know how it's going to fit together. You don't know what it's going to look like. You have to go back and focus on the Father. That's where that peace comes from. We have to develop the right mind, the right thinking. Isaiah 26 says that God will keep in so-so peace. God will keep a little bit of peace. No, God will keep in perfect peace, the kind of peace that transcends and is above all understanding and knowing. God will keep in perfect peace those whose minds, their hearts are steadfast in their relationship with him. He will allow you to walk in that even if peace. You know, and there's real danger in not having peace. Because if you don't have peace, you're going to have worry, you're going to have fear, you're going to have turmoil. And because every single one of us, we long for peace. We want to be in a good place. But if we don't have that peace within, what we begin to do is we try to make the peace. We begin to manipulate circumstances. We manipulate relationships. We manipulate finances and money and jobs and circumstances. We just want to do something that's going to cause us to have peace, and even to a place where we seek peace so much we begin to compromise. Where there's a lack of peace, there's an abundance of compromise. And see, that's where it happens whenever you're facing the flame and the authority says to bow down and worship, and we think in our minds, well, if I just bow down, I can confess it as sin later, and I'll have peace. If you're really lonely, you make a compromise morally. Man, if I could just be in a relationship, then I can be at peace. If I had just a little bit more money, you know, my boss has got more than he really needs. I could just take that. He'd never miss it. And that would just solve so many of my problems. And we think, wow, then I'll have peace. If I could just get this bill off my back, if I could just get this paid off, if I could just have a relationship, if I could just feel like I belong to someone, if I could just, that causes us to make so many compromises because we seek that peace. But as believers, we have to know that peace happens in us and it's not to us. We're always going to be in a place that we're struggling. So how do we get to that place? I want us to think back to the box. What do we need whenever we open up something that has a lot of chaos and struggle in it? What three things do we need? We need make sure nothing is missing, nothing is broken. That's when we become convinced that God is enough in our circumstance. See, that's that part, there's nothing too difficult for God, and God is for me. Nothing is too difficult for God, and God is for me. That peace is nothing missing, nothing broken. See, the only time we'll look at a circumstance and think something is missing or broken is whenever we already have this projected outcome that we really want, and so we're looking for the pieces to make it look like that. And so we think God's not with us because not everything is in place for it to look like that. We can't put our hope and our peace based on an outcome. It is with a relationship and a knowing that God is for you. So 3 things that we need: nothing to be missing or broken. Number 2, we need clear instructions. We get that from the Bible. Oh my gosh, there he goes again, talking about the Bible. You know what? That's the foundation of our Christian faith. If you want to know where you're going to find peace and begin to be convinced and steadfast in your mind to walk in God's perfect peace, it's going to come from you reading the Bible. There is just, it's like all these people come up with these crazy diets, All you need to do is eat 6 ounces of steamed broccoli and a hot fudge sundae 3 times a day and you're going to lose weight. There's no shortcut to being at a healthy weight. It's diet and exercise. It is taking in less than you burn. There's really no shortcut around that. There's no shortcut around being intimate with God. It requires you to read the Bible. That's just it. not just coming to church and hearing it or listening on the radio. You have to have that time where God can speak to you. So you're in the midst of this struggle and all these pieces around. And in your mind, you're saying, yeah, God, there's nothing too difficult for you, and I know that you're for me. But what I do with all these pieces, it's great that you come to church and listen to a sermon. It's great that you can hear things on the radio, but you have to have that personal time when you are right in the midst of that struggle and you're reading and you're quiet and God says, this word is for you. This is how you deal with that piece that you think is missing. This is how you put that together. You have to have that time with God. That's the clear instructions. The second thing you need. The third thing you need is have a hotline. What happens if I know that nothing is missing and nothing is broken and the instructions are good? The hotline is just your time of prayer with God. God speaks to you through the word and God speaks to you through prayer. There's no shortcut to that. If you don't spend time with God, you're going to bank all of your outcome, all of your peace based on what you think it needs to end up looking like. And that can shipwreck your faith. The next time you face a struggle, you're going to think, you know what? God doesn't love me because last time he allowed this to be so bad. He allowed it to turn out so wrong. What do you mean? No, you have to have that even if peace. Even if you are so convinced that nothing's too difficult for God and God is for you. When the world's most powerful army is barreling down on you, you've lost your soulmate and the love of your life, you've faced a financial difficulty, you've opened up a financial time bomb, when your children have gone absolutely crazy, you got a bad report from the doctor. You need to have that peace before you open up those kind of boxes. You need to start now. Becoming convinced nothing is too difficult for God. God is for you. And through that, you will have peace in you, not to you. And where that is cultivated is your time with God, reading, praying, allowing God to speak to you. Peace is not about the absence of struggle. Jesus said in John 16, he said, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. Because in this world you will have trouble, you will have struggle, you will have heartache, you will have brokenness, but take heart. I have overcome the world. I give you something that is a whole lot stronger than brokenness. I stand in your midst and I give you the strength to face the flame. And it doesn't matter the outcome. You're not looking at the outcome. You're looking at your heart and your relationship with God. And you say, God, even if you slay me, as Job said, even if you slay me, yet will I praise you. That is even if faith. Let's stand and let's pray together. God bless you. We love you. We thank you that you are the God that supplies all of our need. We thank you that there is nothing too difficult for you. We thank you that you are for us. And God, train us, teach us, give us the mind, the passion for you, so that it matters not what we face. It matters not what box of struggle, chaos, hurt, brokenness that we open. We'll be able to look at all the pieces of that. We won't have any idea how to put it together. It may even wreck so many things in our life, but we'll be able to look at it, stare it in the face, stand squarely on peace and say, even if. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, guys. See you next week.